Hey guys, Kathy Iconis here and ready to jump into our lesson for today. It's all about client management, and we are going to be talking about everything that we deal with when we deal with our clients through um, all of the bookkeeping stuff, running our business, all of that, all of the stuff we go through. Okay, so first we're going to do a little bit of making sure that we're putting ourselves first, and then I'm going to talk about creating boundaries and the project life cycle, going through all of those phases and what all of that means throughout all those phases and dealing with that with your business. So, the first thing I want to talk about is putting yourself first. This is so important because remember, you're in business for yourself. You created this for, say, more flexibility, more opportunities to be with your kids, your family, more time off, no one telling you what to do, no boss, not all of those different reasons. Those are the reasons you went into business. Whatever that is, you want to be true to yourself and continue to do that. So you've got to put yourself first. Remember, it's you first and then your clients. I know this is all about supporting them and helping make their businesses better, but you got to remember yourself first. Trust me, I've made this mistake a million times, and it can be pretty difficult to deal with. And once you get into that bad relationship with someone, trying to walk it back is somewhat difficult. So remember, you get to choose which clients you want to work with. I know when you're starting out, you're like, oh, just anyone that'll pay me. But really think about, do you want to work with a client that makes you uncomfortable, unhappy, all of this sort of stuff? If you don't feel excited about that from the beginning, that's probably not a good thing. Remember, you're going to have to live with it, whatever decision you make, right? You get to choose what services you will provide and won't provide. That comes down to, like, do you want to do inventory? Do you want to do manufacturing work? Do you want to do job costing? All these types of things. Do you want to be writing manual checks and signing them? Do you want to go into a client's office? That was a big no for me. Those are the sorts of things that you get to decide. You get to dictate what you want to do and what you don't want to do. It's okay to say no to clients and say it's not a good fit. That is always my go-to thing. Just isn't a good fit. I don't think we're on the same page as to what your needs are in the services that I provide in my practice. So it's not a good fit, right? You get to dictate when the work will be performed. It's not on their timeline, it's your timeline. They made the engagement with you. They're having you provide those services. So remember, you get to dictate that. If they don't like that, then they shouldn't have hired you. Now, you need to be clear with that up at the beginning, but you get to decide when the work's done. It is your business, your timeline. You have control over this, okay? Don't care more about your clients' businesses than they do. Whew, that one's hard. For me, I have gotten into that definite situation a lot where I get stressed out about the client and the decisions they're making, and I know what impact it'll have on their business more so than they do. And that shouldn't be the case. It's their business, their decision. If you get yourself to that point where you're all raveled up and worried about what they're doing and stressing out about their business, it's time to take a step back and look at your business first. See how all of that is impacting your business, and maybe it's time to deal with that relationship with the client. Maybe it's not, you need to change your scope, maybe less communication, maybe it's time to fire them. There's all these different things, but you don't want to get into the position where you care more about what happens, the decisions they make, than they do. If they're not stressing out about it, you shouldn't be either. It's not a a vacuum where if they're not stressing out, that means we need to do more stressing for them. It just doesn't work that way. Know when it's time to let a client go. We'll be talking about that more, but really it comes down to gut. And, are you just over it? You try to keep these relationships going and all that sort of stuff, but are you just over it? You can't handle it anymore. You're avoiding them. You're avoiding doing the work. You just feel it in the pit of your stomach, like your gut. You just can't do it anymore. And you got to be true to yourself. Again, you're creating a business that, makes you happy. If you're not happy with a client, then you need to move on. Okay? And don't apologize unless there's a reason. Now, I'm the biggest one of saying, if you make a mistake, own it, tell a client about it, tell them what you're going to do to fix it, move on, right? But do not apologize for things just because the easy way is to apologize. Like, if they make a mistake, I'm sorry there was a mix up, No, don't apologize for it. You might not need to call someone out on it, but when you find yourself apologizing all the time, you put yourself in an inferior position to someone so that they feel like they have more control over you. And people remember the words you say, not necessarily the intention of them, but the words. So if they remember you're saying I'm sorry all the time, then they can come to the perception of they're making mistakes, they're not doing things right, they're not confident in what they're doing, all of this sort of stuff, like they're a mess, they're disorganized, because you're just saying, I'm sorry I didn't reply to you, I'm sorry I didn't do this, I'm sorry I didn't do that. And if you look up on Google, there's like a million different sites that'll tell you how not to apologize for things. You can say things like, thank you for your patience in my reply to stuff, instead of I'm sorry for not replying earlier. And don't oversell it. Don't feel like you have to explain yourself for whatever you feel a need to apologize about. If you couldn't make something, you can't make something, and don't over explain that, right? But don't put yourself in that position where you're inferior, you're putting yourself down, and you're not confident on what you're doing and running your business. So back to putting yourself first. Don't push yourself down. Keep on putting yourself out there and believing in yourself and owning who you are, what you'll accept and what you don't accept. And if you can continue to do that, that is going to be the most beneficial part of your business. You're going to be like just crazy awesome with that. Okay, now let's jump into creating boundaries with our clients. So we talked about putting yourself first. And so how do you do that is by starting with creating boundaries with your client. You want to do this from the very beginning of your engagement. Even before then, when you're talking to a lead and all of your communication, make sure you have clear boundaries. And the interesting thing is that when you have boundaries in place and you are consistent with them, people respect that and thrive with that because they know what they can do and they can't do. They know how to deal with it. They're more, I think, responsive, more responsible, and everything just works better. So my example is this with kids, okay? Kids love to play, love to do a million different things, right? But if you just let them go and do whatever they want, and don't set any boundaries, you're going to end up with whining, complaining, wanting you to come do things, all of that sort of stuff. Just maybe disengaging from something. It's just a matter of when you have those boundaries and when you set these controls, these things around whatever situation you're in, they know where to be. Okay? You're just kind of putting that fence around things. Now, you don't have to be so super tight and control every little aspect of things, because that usually ends up blowing up in your face, right? But I notice with kids, if you start to set boundaries, there's less bickering, there's less negativity in the situations that they're in, because they know where they belong. They know how to operate within the boundaries you set for them. So this is the same thing with clients. If you give them that realm of, here's how we operate, here's what we do, here's how we handle things, it gives them that comfort level. It gives them the understanding of what to expect, and they know how to operate. They don't freak out as much. They're not as uncomfortable and have hissy fits and all of that. So giving them those boundaries from the beginning is actually a good thing, and it's not disrespectful. It's not a negative thing. It's giving them a complete understanding of what to do. So, like I said, you've got to be consistent about that. If you let people just keep on bouncing out of those boundaries, they're going to tear it all apart for you, and you're going to end up dealing with a whole bunch of like toddlers and kids having hissy fits all over the place. You don't want that situation. You don't want to have to be a parent to your clients, right? So basically, you're almost training your clients on how to deal with you and how to handle this engagement, this relationship that you have between the two. You want to have a clear understanding of what you will do, what you won't do. So when you come together and start writing out all the services that you're going to be performing in your engagement letter or your contract, you want to talk about what you're doing and also include what you don't do in those situations. If there's something like, it's not 24/7 support. It's support within certain amount of time, when to expect return emails, when, just have a clear understanding of what you're going to do. You're not going to reply to things on the weekend or do some crazy project for someone, fast reply because you have an emergency, to do it on the weekend, that sort of stuff. All that stuff, how do you handle it? Giving them, what's the best way to contact you? What's your response time? How do you work? What do they expect from you? What happens if situations? How do they handle all of those? So giving them those boundaries and those expectations actually makes things so much better for you and that relationship with the client going forward. Again, less hissy fits, less tantrums, less of that negativity in your life, right? So let's talk about jumping into the project life cycle next. So there are 5 phases to the project life cycle. And I'm going to go through each of these in depth throughout this lesson. So we're going to be talking about initiation, so that initial call with the client and initial conversation, learning about the stuff. Then planning what the project's going to be, how is that relationship going to look, setting those expectations, all of that sort of stuff. Execution. So once we have that engagement with the client, getting it done. What does getting it done look like? How do we do all of that sort of stuff? Monitoring and controlling it. So making sure that the systems we have in place for those projects are working, and making sure everything in our business is streamlined, operating well, monitoring all of that, controlling all of that, making sure that what's supposed to happen is happening. Okay. And then if we do have closure to a project, our goal here, if you're going to do monthly bookkeeping or ongoing bookkeeping, is that those projects don't end necessarily. But I'll tell you that they do. And you got to be prepared for what happens when that does come up. So, like, when do you fire a client? What kind of stuff do you do when you're offboarding a client? How do you handle that whole situation? Because closure will happen, closing out a project, ending a relationship with a client will happen. So we're going to still talk about it. Okay. Now, we don't hope that happens all the time, but it will happen. Okay, so the first phase of the project lifecycle is initiation. So this is what I talk about with talking to a lead for the first time, having those initial conversations with them, and figuring out, how is this all going to work. So here's the goal is learn more about their business and their needs. So there's different ways that we can do that, of getting that information from a client. It could be an intake form, it could be a conversation, but really you're trying to gather all of this information as to the client, what they need, what's going on, all of that sort of stuff. And another point I will make before I show you some things is qualifying leads. So a qualified lead means that it is a good fit for your business. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the job and be able to move on, but it is a good fit for you. It's someone you do want to work with, and you want to continue that fact finding and this whole little proposal process to go through. The worst thing that happens is if you spend a lot of time on unqualified leads, people you don't want to work with, and it takes you a while to find that out with them. So I've always kind of tried to put things in place to kind of weed out people that I don't want to work with, that are not good fits for my business. Talking about, who your ideal client is. If we go back to the marketing plan and setting that all up, or even our first lesson of figuring out, again, who that ideal client is, who do you want to work with, what services do you want to provide, and figuring out who does not fit the bill. Okay, so it could be they're in the wrong industry. They need different types of services that you don't provide, like that inventory stuff or whatever it might be. Maybe their business is too small or too big, or they have too many employees or not enough. They are looking for someone cheap, and you don't want to be the cheap person on the block. All of these sorts of things are what kind of characteristics do you think people are looking for, or that they have, that aren't going to fit what fits your needs. Okay, so how do you find ways to weed those people out and try to, get them out of this funnel that people go through of seeing if this is a good relationship and a good fit, and starting to work together, making the decision to work together. So we want to kind of like look at those things and figure those out. So let me show you some tools that I have. So the first thing, I'll make this bigger, and actually do this. First thing I have, this is like my pricing page. So you can do things a couple different ways. You don't have to put pricing on your website. You can, go through that and have it through your proposal process and figure that out. Looking at this is more menu pricing, fixed fee pricing. Doesn't matter what client comes in, this is the pricing. So I don't have a lot of conversations with my clients about what the pricing is going to be, because that's it up front. Now, if they don't meet some of these limitations, like if they have 500 bank accounts, the price is going to go up, right? So there's different things that little caveats in there, but in general, this is it, right? So what I'm doing is I'm putting my prices out there, and if people don't feel comfortable spending that sort of money on things, they're not going to reach out to me. So I've already cut out people that the budget doesn't apply. This is just too much. They're not going to do this, and there you go. If they want different services, they'll see that and it won't be on there. This is my way of saying, here it is, here's everything up front. Here you go. If you don't like this, don't reach out. Okay, it's going to be a waste of your time. And they'll maybe look at the website and be like, okay, we're going to look at someone else. It's fine. It's going to happen. You don't want every client out there. You want people that are good fits for you in your business so that you can thrive in that relationship and be a true asset to that business. So other things you can do, you can maybe put on your website saying that your fees start at this amount or your average fees are. You can do that. You can not have anything and then have them reach out to you, and you can tell them then that our fees start at blah, blah, blah. But it definitely, budget is one of those things that a lot of people worry about and wonder, like, how can you charge these fees and this sort of stuff? Well, I'm not dealing with the people that are going to come out and be like, I want to pay you $20 an hour, because they're going to see my website and know that's not going to happen. So I don't have to have those conversations with those people and try to explain it all to them, explain my value to them, because it's just, I'm weeding them out. They're not qualified. That's not who I want to work with. There we go. Okay. Then gathering information. So you can do something like this intake form. You can get the information up front from them, or you can do this and ask them these questions throughout a conversation with a client. Definitely if you have an intake form, I would still recommend having a follow-up conversation with a client, or lead, and seeing, kind of going over their responses, seeing if there's anything else that pops out in the conversation. The biggest thing is when you have that initial conversation with a client or initial communication like this form, is you want to provide as many open-ended questions, and basically you're guiding them in different directions where you feel like you need more information on things, so that they'll just start talking and start going, and then you can follow up with okay, explain this to me, explain that to me, that sort of stuff, because you really want to listen more, take more notes. I would say if you do have a client call and you're taking notes, that I think it is less distracting if you are writing down those notes on paper than if you're typing them in, because you're going to hear that keyboard and you're going to see that. I'll explain to clients oh, I'm taking notes on this. Okay. Yeah. So it feels like I'm more engaged in that conversation and I really care about what they're saying, and I'm putting all of that together and I'm thinking about it. So I feel like it's still a really good thing to be taking notes and paying attention. I just think it's a little distracting when you have the clickety clack of the keyboard. So let's talk about the stuff what I do on this intake form and getting this information. It's interesting that, so if someone's looking at the website, they pick out what they want, what service they want to do. If they're ready to go, they're going to fill out a lot of information, and it's interesting what they'll put in there. So you actually have less that you need to get out of them when you're on the phone with them. So here, right up front, select a bookkeeping package. Again, I'm verifying that they looked at my pricing page and they're good with one of these prices. They're good with going this direction, and they're like, okay, I can handle this. Those prices don't line up with those moved around. Whatever. Don't pay. Yeah. This is a sample, right? Then tell us about your business. Very basic. I need to know your business name. I need to know what you're selling. I like what are your sources of revenue? So if someone says, hey, they can take that in many different ways. If they're online retailers, we'll be like, oh, we get money from Amazon. We get stuff from our website. We do this or that. So look at that way. Maybe you have Like I wholesale things, I retail things, or I get, I charge like website or interior design. I get revenue from design services, I get commissions off of selling furniture, I get all of this. So it's different answers for different industries, and it kind of just, that question works in all those different ways. Looking at their annual revenue. What I've figured out over the years is if a business has over $3 million in revenue, they're less likely to need an outsourced CFO or bookkeeper or something like that, because they're at the point where they are going to have more of an accounting department within the business and really need to start to fill out that whole process. Now, that's not to say that you still can't do this. There are businesses that have high transaction projects or revenue items. So maybe they sell something for $500,000 for something, and it doesn't take up a whole bunch of operational, stuff, not necessarily a whole bunch of accounting side of things. And you have a lot of those. You can have a business with a couple people, still fairly small business, and make 10 million, 20 million, all of that sort of stuff. So it's still possible. I just said more often than not, they're going to be in this range. I usually like to stay away from clients that are under 100,000 because I feel like their budgets aren't necessarily going to support what I'm looking at. So $500 a month for a year, I'm cutting into their profits how much? So I don't know if it's worth it to them at that point. So it all depends, right? Number of employees, how many you're going to deal with. You get into HR issues and stuff like that when you start to get into a lot of employees that honestly for me freak me out and I don't want to have to deal with. So I kind of try to stay away from big employers because I don't want to do that, right? And then the big one, what are your biggest business challenges right now? Or you can say, what are your pain points? What are you dealing with? That really gets them to kind of just start laying it all out for you. So you can figure out what's going on, what's important to this business owner, what they're really stressed out about, what they need, all of that sort of stuff, right? That's great information to have. That's really, I think, the core of helping you develop what services you're going to provide for that client, that kind of package, what's going to fit their needs and everything. Then we go into more logistics of tell us about your accounting system, what software do you use, list your bank and credit card accounts, not like the logins, but how many bank accounts do you have, who are they with, how many credit card accounts, all that sort of stuff. How many financial transactions do you think you have each month? See, this one, I feel like most clients have no clue what the answer is to this. So it's in here. See if they fill it out, see if they don't. I would definitely still compare this to what's actually in their accounting system or QBO to see if it's real. Because again, I don't really think they'll have a clue as to what's going on there. What are you using to pay your bills? So kind of see do I need to do bill pay for the client? Are they doing most of their stuff on credit cards and it's not a big deal? All that, right? How do you do your invoicing? So again, I've talked about how profitable invoicing can be. So what system or workflow do they use there? What payroll provider do you use? You can see if you really want to work with that payroll provider or not. Say, once you figure that out, that could be a qualifying thing. What other apps are you using or anything related to your accounting workflow? So this one's really good too. If they're using other things, are those apps that you want to use, you want to learn about, or you do already know, that's a good fit for you, all of that sort of stuff, okay? This is also a great area. It took me a while to get to this one, and I like these questions. Tell us about your current bookkeeper. Who is it? Are you doing your books? Do you have someone else outside bookkeeper doing your books? Do you have someone internally doing it? Those are really cool things to start to understand. And then why are you looking for a new bookkeeper? Like they're really crappy at their job, all of that sort of stuff. When was the last time your bank and credit card accounts were reconciled? Some people might just say, like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it could be, who knows, last year, last month, all that, you know? Do you think you require any cleanup or catch up work? It puts that in their brain as a possibility there, of maybe there's more than I thought. Maybe I need to be prepared for even more of a fee related to that cleanup stuff. So you have that there. Have you had any issues with a prior bookkeeper that we should be aware of? Yeah, this is one that took me a while to figure out. Kind of trying to see if someone's ever been fired by a bookkeeper before, if they've had a bad relationship with a bookkeeper before. That came up, I think that came up with a client that I had that ended up being just a really bad client. Just did not respect boundaries, condescending, questioning how I did things, all of this sort of stuff, right? And then later on, I found out that he had been fired by 2 other accountants or bookkeepers before me. And I'm like, I really need to find this information out beforehand. It's a good idea. So you kind of you can see if they're skirting the question around, or, it wasn't a good fit, that sort of stuff. Is there anything else you want us to know about the state of your books? Open-ended question, kind of getting that there. Then contact information here. That's just because it's highlighted. You see that little thing updated. Phone, website. I like looking at their website just to see what's going on. I get my research. I find out more about them, all of that sort of stuff. And then how did you hear about us is really important, so that if it's a referral from someone else, you can thank them, or if it's coming from Google search or whatever, so you can kind of get an idea of how they found you there. So what I've done for you is that we actually have this. I've shared this form with you guys within the lesson. I printed it to a PDF, and then I also gave you the link so that you can copy this form into your own Google Drive. So 3 different options for you to look at and review it. You can definitely make edits to this and go from there. I will say that there's benefits, there's pros and cons to going with this method. The pro, you're getting a lot of information, you'll be able to handle it and digest it and look at it, right? The con is you have less of a conversation with the client later, because you're not just going ahead and asking these questions. That creates this conversation, this flow of the conversation that you would have if you didn't have this form already in place and kind of putting that there. You might find more information out if you just have that conversation first, or you shorten this intake form down to less questions, and then have some of these questions as things that you ask while you're on the phone with them. So it all comes down to what kind of situation do you thrive in? Play around with it. See what's going to work for you. What gets into a good flow for you, because that's the other thing, is talking to leads can take a lot of time, and they pop up when you don't expect it at unscheduled times, and you have to keep on doing other client work, and so you have to balance dealing with leads and dealing with the client work. So the more systemized you have this, the better, because it's less stressful on you. It's these things that, again, pop up out of nowhere because you can't plan when someone reaches out to you. And you have to be pretty responsive, on the ball, and it takes up a lot of time and energy within that sales cycle to go through with them. So be prepared for that. Okay. Now, the next phase of client management is the planning phase. We've had that initial conversation with the client, we've gathered some information. Now we need to dive in and do some research as to matching up what they've said with what is actually going on in the books and within their accounting systems and all of that fun stuff. So the process I like to go through is what I call diagnosing the books. And it's really diving into the books, getting an overview of what's going on, and then figuring out what needs to be done. So what I've done for you is I've included the download for the practice guide on downloading the books, and you also now have access to the diagnosing the books course, little mini course with the video that explains all the steps that I go through when I'm diagnosing the books. Basically, it's very similar to the month-end stuff we talked about in the last lesson of exporting the trial balance and looking through everything and kind of figuring out where things are. Have things been reconciled? Are there issues in the accounts that make it look a little like, oh, I need to research this, see what's going on, all of that sort of stuff. So you're going to diagnose what's going on in there and then figure out what needs to be done to maybe clean up, get it where it needs to be, but also what's going to need to be done going forward so that you're making sure that everything is taken care of within all the transactions, everything that's going on in the bookkeeping and the accounting side of things. So you want to use that information and start creating your proposal, figuring out exactly what needs to be done, and you want to get really, really specific as to what you're going to do. Remember, we want to set those boundaries in place from the beginning of, okay, here's what's going to happen, here's, all of this sort of stuff. Let's talk about it. Is there any cleanup work needed? Remember, we kind of put that question out there of, is it a mess? Do we need to handle it? Do you need some sort of cleanup on these things? And after diagnosing the books, we see, okay, there's some stuff that needs to be caught up or cleaned up. And that's going to be, this is what's going on. So I have like 5 months that hasn't been reconciled and all that sort of stuff. And then kind of putting that out in the proposal. Okay, this is the cleanup work that's going to need done. We need 5 months of cleanup work and catching up on things. And make sure that also all the services you're going to say that you need or you will be doing are things that are still consistent with what the client was looking for. So if the client said, I don't need this, please don't put it in your proposal unless you can make the argument with the client as to why it is needed in their business. But you want to show that you are listening to them and offering them the services that they need right now, and what they want right now, okay? So continuing on with your proposal, you want to get specific about everything the lead should expect. So you're going to explain the process, but from their perspective, not necessarily from yours. You're not going to say, here's how I reconcile everything, and here's da da da. What should they expect from you? What are they going to see from your end, or what do they need to know that's going to be done? So I can say I do a month-end close. They might not know what that means, but I say I do a month-end close, wrap up at the end of every month, and I'll deliver XYZ to you. I'll be in your books once a week, recording transactions, updating everything, all of that stuff. You don't have to do specifics as to exactly what you're going to do, but the things that they know needs to be done, and from their perspective, explaining it in their way of like, okay, this is going to get done, this is going to get done, payroll's going to get done every 2 weeks, this or that, like you have your own ways, things that you're going to pay attention to when you do payroll. Do I need to add an employee? Do I need, all of those are specific tasks that go into it. But for them, okay, payroll's going to get done every other week. It's taken care of, right? Again, now, when will the work be performed? So giving them that guidance, what to expect of, okay, I'll be in your books once a week, or I'll do invoicing twice a month, or you're going to get your reports by the 15th of every month. So you can see the timeline. When does all that happen, and how is that all taken care of? Then how are you going to communicate with your clients? Are you using some app to do communication? I know some people use Slack to have conversations. There's other apps that you can do to communicate, or is it just email, or you can text? Is it 24/7? Or, I ask that you send in email requests. We'll get back to you. The interesting thing on my end is when I tell my clients I'm going to be in their books once a week, and I tell them, hey, every Tuesday I'm going to go in your books. I'm going to, go through your transactions, record everything, blah, blah, blah. And really, if you have anything that comes up, any questions or anything, I'll be going through all of that information every Tuesday, because it's kind of your day, right? And I'm looking at everything of your stuff on Tuesday. So they know that they're not going to get a 24-hour response or something within 24 hours from me, because they know I'm not going to look at their books again until Tuesday. Now, I also tell them, like, hey, it's not like that's your day, but if there is any kind of emergency or anything that comes up, I definitely am ready to look at that and help you and want to help you with those things. Just kind of put urgent in the subject line or whatever, so that I can handle that for you. So again, getting specific, and it might not be something you include in the proposal, but it's the way you tell the clients what to expect, right? Detail the pricing. Don't just say it's $500 a month or $3,000 a month. Explain what you're doing for that $3,000. So that helps you define the scope of the engagement, so that when they start asking you to do more, you can go back to your contract and say, hey, that's not what we agreed to. That's not in there. So this will be an additional service that we provide. Got to handle that. So that's why the benefit of detailing all of that out of, okay, I'm going to, weekly transaction coding for 5 accounts. When they add another 5, then you can call them on it and say something like, hey, our reality has changed. We need to update our engagement based on those changes of the business, that sort of thing. So if you just lay it out there, then things are gonna change, and you're gonna kind of get stuck probably in a bad situation on the pricing side. So the more information you can provide around that, the better. You might not break down each individual line item of things. I used to do that of, hey, if I do weekly coding, it is $200, month end is $300, that sort of stuff. If you start laying that out, then when clients have questions, they might say, okay, well, X that out, I don't need that. X that out, I don't need that. And the problem I ran into, especially off of the way that I do the work and ongoing and stuff, they might not think that they need month end, but they do. And it's part of my whole process. So I can't really just cut it out, or I can't just cut out doing the transactions and just do it once a month, or, it made for confusion when discussing things with a client. Now, if I come up with pricing for a client and they say, I can't afford that, then I can come back and say, okay, what of these services do you think you don't need? I can cut back on the services. I'm not going to negotiate with you on price, but I can cut back on things and get you a lower fee. So tell me what you don't need, and I'll get you updated pricing on that package of things. So that's how I do that versus, nickel and diming every line item on there. So, and then most importantly here is get some sort of contract or engagement letter in place. There are a ton of templates out there, and you want to be able to protect yourself. This is the biggest way to protect yourself of anything that happens. You want to have a clear way to get out of the engagement, a clear way that people need to notify you if they're going to get out of the engagement, when you're going to get paid, what exactly you're going to do, what you're not going to do, what responsibilities are you taking, what risk are you taking, are you in charge of their management decisions or are you not? All of that sort of stuff. I'll tell you that I started out with templates that I found on the internet, but then once I grew and got more into it and was able to invest, I did invest in an attorney to come up with a template that was geared toward my business and towards my state to make sure that things were covered. And I felt more comfortable of that being the backbone of my engagements versus just something that I found online. But it's still something that you can use. Likelihood that that is going to be utilized later for any litigation or anything like that is pretty small, but it gives you both, you and the client, a comfort. And I've used it in a way of, well, our engagement says this, our contract says this, because it's something you mutually agreed to, versus, well, when we initially talked about it, I was planning on doing this, blah, blah, blah. Here, this is a contract, we agreed to this is what's going to happen, right? I deliver this, you do this, there we go. So that is making sure you get all that together, and we're planning, this is our plan of here's what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what's going to get done, and now we're coming to that mutual agreement of how that's going to happen, right? And we're both on the same page going forward. Okay, so are you ready to get this project started? It is all about execution right now in the client management lifecycle. We are starting it. We're actually doing this and getting going on everything. So what we like to call the first part of a project is onboarding, getting our client set up with us in our systems on that role, getting things going, all of that sort of stuff. So you want to have a clear understanding of some of these things. So when does the project start? You want to make sure you have that clear expectation with your client of, okay, when you're going to get started, what's going to get going. Usually for me, a caveat that I have is that the contract and the first payment needs to be made before anything can get started. So sometimes that might be delayed if I'm trying to go back and forth and get that signature, all of that sort of stuff. So that's one thing that they know with me. You're not going to get, we're not going anywhere until I get paid first, like upfront fee or whatever it is, and that contract is signed, because I'm not playing around with that stuff, right? And then next, you want to have a clear list of the information you're going to need to start the project. A great place to gather that would be from when we go through and diagnose the books. Remember, I got that practice guide saved for you. So really, when we go through and figure out exactly what needs to be done, what we're going to be doing, and any cleanup work, we could go through that and figure out also what information do we need from the client and how are we going to do it. Most of the time, this is getting bank access, login access to things. Know that on a lot of the banks and credit cards, you can be set up as an administrative user so that you have like see-only view or read-only view of the bank statements, transactions, and that sort of stuff, but you're not actually able to do anything with the money or anything like that. So that is the way I prefer to be set up. In reality, clients are also going to just give you their passwords, their login and passwords for you to log in. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they don't want to give you anything and they just want to provide you with documents or something like that. So I handle this in a couple of ways of, if they want to give me the login information, then now with the authorization through text and those sorts of things, you want to have be able to like text the client beforehand, like, hey, I need to log in. I'm going to need the authorization code. Can you send that to me before you log in and get that information? Another thing that I've heard is that people will ask to be have their cell phone as a backup way to get that verification code, so that when we try to log in, it says, okay, which system do we contact to send that verification code? Then the bookkeeper could select their own cell phone or whatever to get that verification. So it's one way to do it. If they're not willing to give over any passwords, you can look at a product like HubDoc, where the client would go in, log in, and give that system the information, and the system should pull in bank statements and could bring in check copies, deposit copies, a whole bunch of a wealth of information. So you kind of have that that barrier where they can manage the login, but you can still get all the information that you need. The hardest part here is if you don't have easy electronic access to get things, like you have control of getting that access with your own login or a way to verify the login or something like that, it slows down everything when you rely on the client on things. So if you can, as a boundary item, say it's important that I have access to these things. If not, then I can't deliver the service timely. You get out of my workload. For me, it screws up the whole process, and it drives me insane. So that's things that you need to be aware of. Again, how will you collect that information? I talked about those different things. What is the timeline you have for onboarding? And here's the thing. There's the concept of how long it will take you and the total amount of time it will take you, but then also that time scheduled out in a reasonable schedule of your workload and everything. So it might take you an hour or 2 hours to set everything up and get things going. But do you have that scheduled out and availability in your workload right now? And how does that all work? What the client's going to care about is, when's it going to get done? What is this phase? How do I get through this phase? And that sort of thing. So you really want to give them that timeline, that phase in time. And I would actually include some sort of buffer time so that you have an area of, if life happens and something comes up, you have that in there. Explain what work is going to be done during the onboarding process. Is there a lot of catch-up work that you're going to be doing? Is that going to delay doing any of the weekly or monthly work? What is the balance there? How does that happen? And I'll tell you, in my experience, that I have gotten big cleanup projects that were like, that's the first phase of the project, and then we went into the monthly bookkeeping. The cleanup took so much longer that in the end it jumped into the next month. So if I had a monthly fee, it jumped into the next month, and I hadn't done any of the other monthly bookkeeping because I was trying to do all the catch up. So what I have learned is that once you get going, even if you're doing cleanup, try as much as possible to also start at that date and start doing that monthly work or that ongoing work going forward, because otherwise you're going to get into this like gray area of, well, I haven't completed the month end work or the catch up work and gotten there, so how can I really start the ongoing stuff? And me, I'm like this guilt ridden woman that I don't know, I always like worry about, am I treating my clients fairly or whatever, where I'd be like, oh, well, I just won't charge them that monthly fee, and then the cleanup will include the new month, no big deal, right? So I'm losing out on that money. I didn't put myself first. I got into this uncomfortable situation. That was my way to get out of it, was to do that and lose the money. So be aware that stuff happens, and that's why I feel like if you are doing cleanup, try to get into that monthly or that ongoing stuff as soon as possible. So you have that there. How often will you update the client? This is really important for onboarding, is to be very consistent and do it frequently. I would say at the very least once a week, giving them an update as to how things are going, what's been updated, what's been on cleanup or catch up or anything like that. Like how's everything going? Are there any open items? So even if it's just onboarding and getting connected to accounts and pulling, maybe you need reference documents or something like that, you can give them an update. Say, hey, we've gotten all of this information. We still have this outstanding. We're waiting for you so that we can complete the onboarding process. Just having that consistent communication at the beginning is extremely important to kick off this whole engagement, right? And then you also want to be clear what happens once the onboarding is completed. So how does that relationship change? You're going to be, I feel like, more communicative during onboarding because you need all this information, and pretty much you set yourself up so you don't rely on the client for the information as much once you get into the flow and onboarding is done. So explain how that relationship is going to change, or give them the heads up like, hey, we're now into going forward. This is what's going to be happening from now on, that sort of stuff. Just reminding them and going forward that way. Then the next phase is maintenance, doing the work, completing the work, continuing on with the work, getting into that flow of things, right? And you want to have an idea of what will the regular tasks be, how will that be scheduled. So like I've said before, I usually give my clients an expectation of 1 day a week is when I am working on their books. And I do the ongoing recording transactions every week, that sort of thing. So I'm always in there. So at the very least, I'm touching your books once a week, right? And so that's gives my client that expectation of, okay, I'm getting the books every Monday or every Tuesday. And that's what, my client understands. Then what are the deliverables? What do they expect from me so that I can make sure that I have that in my process and I'm managing that? So am I giving them certain reporting at the end of the month? Do I give them reporting once a week? Do I don't know, all of the different options, right? Like what are we providing? What have we agreed to based off of that engagement? So we have that, everything's flowing properly. How often will you check in with the client? Again, my idea is going to be at least once a week. So if I am touching the books, say every Tuesday, say, hey, just give them an update. Hey, I've, gone through everything. It looks good. Let me know if there's anything happening or something like that. Just some way to keep that line of communication open between you and your client. The last thing you want to do is to make it so much to the situation where the client almost thinks that it's so easy that nothing, like, forgets that you're doing the work. It's so easy and forgets you're doing the work. And then when you do that, they value what you're doing less. If you don't remind them that you're there and you're working hard for them, then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And then at the end of how many months, they look at it and be like, oh, how much am I paying this person? Well, they're not really doing anything and whatever, so I can find someone cheaper. That's happened to me, where because I wasn't communicating enough and I made it look so easy, they went somewhere else and got it done cheaper. And honestly too, I set it up into a system. I made everything like run so smoothly, that it did look easy and everything. So I wanted you have to keep that relationship strong. That comes to this customer experience and making the relationship sticky so they're less likely to look elsewhere or try to find some other solution instead of you. You need to remind them of your value. And it's not like having to throw it in their face. It's just a matter of remind them that you're there. Remind them how awesome you are. Remind them that you're looking out for them. do little things to make sure that they know that you're still there and you're working hard for them and you're supporting them and you're worth every penny, if not like 500 times more. Okay. So that goes into this whole client experience. And what you need to think about is, with maintaining the client, you'd want to have a sticky relationship with them. You don't want them to feel free that they can just, walk out the door, find someone else and be good to go the next day, right? You kind of want to have those strings attached to them and make it harder for them to walk away. And you can do that in positive and negative ways. What I'm going to say is you want to do as much positive as possible, right? You don't want them to feel like they're stuck with you. You want them to be attracted to you and not want to go anywhere else. Not even think about it. Not think it's feasible, So things you think about every touch point you have with the client. What are your emails like? Are those easy communications with them? I know one thing that I like to do is that I make sure that I don't overwhelm clients with a whole bunch of information in emails. I make my emails short. I make them specific about one subject and ask like one question or two questions around that subject, and that's it, right? If you've ever tried sending someone an email with 5 different questions that all relate to different things, you're not going to get a reply to all of those 5 questions. You're going to get a reply to like 1 or 2 of them, right? So I'll actually send out separate emails. So something about, here's my updated invoicing, right? And hey, I have a question about this one client, and does this invoice go out this way, right? And then adding a new employee. Okay, so we added John Smith. Hey, I need to get his W-2. I'm still looking for this, whatever. So that they're not all added into one email that's like looks so overwhelming it's going to take a whole bunch of time to reply to. Something short and sweet, so that it's just like I get my information, come back, good to go. So you think about that experience. Don't make yourself a burden to the clients. Same thing if you're using software that you want the clients to use, then make sure that software is easy for them to use. The last thing you want is for them to associate something difficult with you. So if the software sucks on their end, they're going to relate that to your relationship, and that you don't want that. So you want to make sure that everything's easy from their end and you make it seamless. It's the whole point they came to you is because they are overwhelmed and they didn't know how to handle this. So make it easier for them. Remember, it's all about these little touch points, making it easier. Because otherwise, if it becomes too difficult, they're just going to go back to doing it themselves or find someone else, right? Make it super easy to pay you. Don't make this a difficult thing. You can set up recurring sales receipts or ECHs or whatever within QBO to automatically get paid from your clients. So you don't have to say, send them an invoice, get paid by, get them to write a check to send it to you, and then you deposit it. And what if they don't pay you on time? Then you got to talk to them about, non-payment. And you're in the books, you're handling all of this stuff. So don't make yourself a problem out of it. Make it super duper easy to pay you. And, coming back to this perception versus reality, it doesn't matter what is real. What matters is how your client perceives everything. So they don't care if XYZ really happened. If they had the perception that you screwed up and as a result XYZ happened, then all they care about is you screwed up in their perception. It's not because software system doesn't work or, whatever other reason it was. It's their perception. So you want to get ahead of any perception. You want to think about how they're perceiving things, getting inside their head and understanding how they're thinking about things Because so you want to control that perception, and it's not necessarily about controlling reality of things. You're doing the books, you're doing that concrete work, right? But you got to think about how they're thinking about things and making sure that you're not giving them any room for thinking negatively about what you're doing. Does that make sense? And then being proactive, which is similar of don't wait for the client to get upset about something and ask about something or whatever. Stay ahead of it. Be proactive so that they don't have to even think about it, worry about it, almost deal with it. It just is seamless and easy, but you want to make sure that they know that it's seamless and easy because you're the one delivering it. You're the one doing it, right? They can't find anyone else like you that would be on top of it like this. So just anticipating what they need, being in front of it, doing all of that, and just that's creating this amazing experience. You can do other things like delighting clients with thank you notes, sending them, happy birthdays, holiday cards, sending them little gifts, all that sort of stuff. That is just bonus and sprinkling on top. It's great. It's amazing. But if you don't have just a very basic, easy relationship with communication with the client, all of that stuff isn't going to make that very basic thing better. Because I feel like that is your foundation, and making sure that all of your interactions and your communications, make that as easy as possible. Anything related to the business, just make that easy for them. And you'll be able to keep that client for so much longer. If versus, bad communication, everything like that, they're going to go. And here's the truth of it. It costs more to try to keep on getting new clients than it does to maintain a client. So if you need to fire a client or something like that, that's understandable. That's going to happen in your business. But you want to attract clients that are good fits for you and keep them, and do what you can to keep them without it negatively affecting you, your practice, or anything like that. You want a good relationship. You want to keep that good customer experience, and you want to make sure that there's no reason for them to want to leave and find someone else. So that's how all of this nice execution works. So the next thing we need to consider in the project management lifecycle with a client is to monitor and control the engagement. Make sure everything is on track, nothing kind of falls off the wheels, and we're all keep on chugging along going forward. So there are several things that we want to look at. And also the other thing is, when we're doing this monitoring and controlling, we look at it at the client level, but we also look at the firm level. Look at all of our clients across the board, making sure everything is working in conjunction with each other and nothing is pulling us aside, and again taking, keep all of our wheels on track. Nothing's side railing us here. We're all on the right path together with all of our clients. So it's important to understand to balance that workload. If you're going to have a lot of clients, you want to make sure that you're managing the time frame when things get done between all of those clients, scheduling that out. If you have staff, you want to schedule out their resources, seeing how many clients they can handle and what work they can handle. But making sure you're not scheduling that 20 things are due on the same day, right? Spreading all of this out so that you're able to go through this flow and you have almost the same amount of work every day that you want to work, right? If you're on vacation, you're not setting yourself up to have all these deadlines that are due like right when you come back, because then you're going to feel like you need to do something during that time you're away, or you need to catch up on something. So scheduling the work, you want to balance that between all of your resources. So your own time, your staff time, clients time, all of that, making sure everything's kind of working the way it should. That's why I really like getting out the calendar, looking at stuff, making, planning it out ahead of time, and seeing if everything is working and moving things around if you need to. So I did, for a while I'd have, start out with all my clients. I'm doing it on working on their weekly stuff on Tuesdays. Say, well, once that becomes too much, then the next clients are going to be a different day. Okay. And then the next ones are going to be a different day. So then they end up having their own days, and you're able to stream that, even that all out throughout the week, but able to manage it all. You're balancing everything. Okay. Then also another thing that I like to utilize are control sheets. It allows me to see a big picture view of how everything is working across all of the clients versus having to remember what's happening, just keeping it all in my head and trying to make sure everything's following along and going the right place and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot more beneficial when you have staff too, so that you can get this big picture view of what's going on, and it'll highlight where there's issues. So control sheets can be anything, really, and it's just you're controlling a situation, you're controlling a process. So all I'm doing here is listing out all of my clients, because I want to see from the firm perspective, how are all, here are all the clients that I have to worry about. This situation is a month end one. So then, hey, I have my owner of the job, of like who within my practice is managing this thing. So list myself, list, Susie D or whatever we have down here, right? That way it's just a reference and I can see what's going on. Then I break out the work into phases, and that from the month-end course or the month-end lesson. But you can do this with anything. In one of the earlier lessons, I have the 1099 control sheet. I broke that out into phases, all the things that need to be done, right? That way, when we go through and say that we've completed something, we can see that it's all been done, right? If anything ends up being empty, that is a visual cue that something needs to happen. We need to be paying attention to this. If it's, let's actually delete that and say that was the deadline. Nothing's happened yet. Say that we're at the end of June. What happened? Why is this not done? When we have our communications with our staff, be like, okay, someone explain this one to me, right? So it pinpoints it without you having to go in 500 different directions, figuring out what's going on, and hoping everything in your head's working and hoping everything stays up to date. I like to have something like this to control it. And instead of me having to jump into everything and micromanage, this lets me look at everything at a bigger level, the big picture view of things. Now, next I want to talk about utilizing checklists and templates. And I know you've gotten a ton of checklists and templates out of this course. You know how much everybody loves them. And they help out a practice so much. I mean, honestly, the work that we do is repeatable. It just keeps on going. It's this flow that we get into, and we just, okay, it's time for this thing to happen. It's time for that thing to happen. And you know what's going on. And there's sometimes little differences, different things that add on, different situations that come up. But the flow, the top level flow just goes, and it's consistent, and you can rely on it. So when you create these checklists and templates, you're increasing your productivity because you're not having to remember exactly what you have to do. You've written down what you have to do. You know the steps. They're written down. You just follow them. You just do them. Okay? You're focused on, your brain is taking the energy on doing the work versus figuring out, how do I do the work again? What do I need to do? All that sort of stuff. You're making everything consistent so that it's reliable. It is, what is going to happen in the practice, all the work that's going to be done. Your client understands what's going to be done. Your staff knows what's going to be done. It's consistent, right? And making your firm scalable. This is big. So when you look at a project The beginning of that project, depending on how you price it out, usually is not as profitable as it is maybe a year later or longer or less. Because when we get into that system and that process, we create these efficiencies, especially with checklists and templates. We create these efficiencies. We're able just to repeat what we did, use our brain if any accounting thing comes up, but we're just able to repeat this process. And so this productivity increases, right? We're able to get things done faster and still accurate. And then our profits go up. And if you want to scale your business and keep on getting more clients, the more profitable you are on a client, the more productive and efficient you are, means you can have more clients to manage. So that's why it's so important to systemize things into these workflows so that you can have the time and the energy to expand and do more. And the profit is so much better in these situations. And that's one of the things earlier we're talking about clients leaving, and there's situations where they can leave and you need to fire them. But maintaining a client, the longer you go on, the more profitable you are with that client. More opportunity to grow your services with them, all this sort of stuff. So take advantage of that and set these systems up. I mean, when you're creating a checklist or a template, it really is just as easy as writing down the steps. And then the next time you come in and do it, you go through and make sure follow those steps. If you miss something, add it. If something's not necessary, remove it. But over time, you're building that process, and it's always going to be some sort of evolution off of it. So don't worry about it being perfect. Just get something out there, get it going, and improve upon it every single time. And when you have these checklists and templates in place, it makes it easier to delegate. And then again, scaling, giving stuff to staff, being able to grow a practice into many employees if you want, not having to do some of the grunt work, all of that sort of stuff. And I skipped this where you decrease the possibility of errors. Those mistakes, those easy mistakes, because you didn't remember exactly what you had to do, could all be prevented if you just write down what needs to be done and follow that checklist going forward. That's all you have to do. And I usually make the mistakes when I don't follow my checklist. And I just kind of try to go off of, I think I need to do this. Oh, okay. And follow that. There's going to be less errors when you follow your checklist and do your systems and go through with it all. Just makes life easier. Now, next thing you want to do is looking at technology. Don't just buy into any technology because it's the new cool thing that people want or say that's helping them in their practice and it's amazing. Okay, make sure it's helping you reach your goals. So things we talked about before, if you have your client interacting with it and it's not easy for them to use, it's really not helping you in their relationship. So it's not helping you reach your goals, right? Maybe like I have the situation where I have some clients that I tried to set up on HubDoc, where it connects to your bank accounts and you can pull in statements and stuff like that. Well, some of the banks that they had were not connected to HubDoc and everything. So it didn't help me. It didn't get the benefit that I needed out of it. So there was no point of me using that subscription on that client. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. In some situations you can finagle things, but when you get to the point that you're working so hard to make a system work, then it might not be worth it. It might be easier just to do the little steps that need to be done and do it that way versus spending the money on something and taking all this time and energy to make that system work for you. So utilize technology where it helps you, not where it's hurting you. then also look for paths to increase your revenue. So while you're working with your client and maintaining the client, always monitor this and see if there are things that it's time for the client to move into more advisory services. Maybe they need a different report, or maybe we check in on a Zoom once a month, or something like that, where there's opportunities and you can come up with them and say, hey, maybe you want to have, an ongoing conversation. Maybe you feel more comfortable to discuss these results every month. We can do that for you. We can update our agreement to include that service if you want to. That sort of stuff. So you kind of approaching them, but not with the hard sell on stuff. And then also making sure you prevent scope creep, because so what happens with scope creep is that you have your engagement, your contract of here's everything I was going to do. And then life happens and clients ask for things. And then you feel like you need to provide something and whatever. And say 3 months later, if you looked at that contract, that's not what you're doing anymore. You're doing maybe different things, more things, all over the place, right? So you want to make sure that you're staying true to your agreement and you're not adding more work without getting paid for it. So I understand things might come up every once in a while, but if it becomes a pattern, and honestly, you probably should be more consistent than I have ever been and get in front of it. But know that scope creep will happen. Things will creep in there, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did this happen? I'm spending like 20 more hours a month on this than I ever thought I would. You want to make sure you're monitoring your engagements to make sure that's not happening. Okay? And looking at that. And maybe it's simple as in your checklist, you have those mirror up to what's in your contract. So those checklist items happen. And if new things came up, new requests come up, you can go back and track them and be like, okay, well, this was out of scope. We need to contact the client and talk about this. Or even hopefully you're getting in front of it when it does come up and be like, okay, well, this is not what we agreed to, but I'm definitely willing to help you with this path to increase your revenue. And here's the fee for that, or we can talk about this. Maybe we can change our engagement, all of that sort of stuff. So you want to get ahead of it, because this is another way where you can lose money in your practice. So now we're going to talk about the last part of the client life cycle, part that we want to avoid if we can, but it's project closure, the ending of an engagement with a client. So really, it could be a client coming to you and saying that they're moving on, maybe they're closing up shop, whatever it is. So maybe that is one situation that is closing down this project. But I feel like a lot of the time what happens is when it comes down to firing a client, someone that's no longer a good fit for our business. Really, it comes down to that gut feeling. Are you avoiding them? Are you avoiding the work? Are you stressed out with it all the time? I know that I had a situation where I wasn't doing a lot of work for a client, but they absorbed my brain a lot. Like I thought about them a lot, far more than I needed to, and it stressed me out. So then I knew it was just time to let them go. Now, some of these things here of when to fire a client, they might not necessarily be a complete reason to let them go. If you still have a good relationship, you still want to work with them, then work through some of these situations. You can definitely have open communication and explain this sort of stuff to them. But here's some things that are just kind of red flags or things to be aware of, and things to maybe justify in your mind that it's okay to let a client go. You're not going to keep all of your clients forever. You're going to evolve, you're going to change, and your clients might not be a fit any longer. Whatever happens, it's okay. So maybe they're not paying. Definitely a reason to stop work on them and look at firing them. I know when they aren't paying for me, I will give them notice and say that I'm going to stop work. If it's something that they value you'll all of a sudden get paid on it. So, but that's also why I like to set up situations where I get paid up front, so they don't have to forget about paying me, or they don't have to delay it or anything like that, right? They're not responsive, or they're not supportive of getting you the information you need so you can get your work done. If they're not supporting you and they're not helping you get your work done, then they're not in this together with you. They're not giving you the tools to be successful, which all you want to do is help them be successful. So they're not really helping themselves, right? They're avoiding it. It's not setting you up for success, and it's not putting you in a good situation. You're no longer profitable. You're spending so much time on them, so much energy on them, that you're not making a profit anymore. And if they're not open to a price increase, then we have a situation, right? They don't respect your boundaries. They're calling at all times of the night, the day. I've gotten those like 10 o'clock calls at night or 11 o'clock calls at night, thinking that I'm actually going to pick up and help them. No, they don't. It just shows this lack of respect. And I know that I have that down, just being disrespectful to you. And you need to stand up for yourself and stand up for your business. Again, putting yourself first. I can give you plenty of examples of where I did not put myself first. I actually sat in a waiting room for probably close to an hour past a scheduled meeting that I had with a client, just waiting, where we knew it was an agreed upon time. And I think because I paid a parking fee, I just didn't want to waste it, and drove all the way down to the client. But don't take it. Your client, again, that's breaking boundaries. You're letting them do it again. They will do it again. I know they do. And just don't, this lack of respect there. Just don't stand for that. They want to be your boss. This is another situation I had where the engagement was not working. The client wanted to tell me what to do, wanted me to do exactly what she said. She had no accounting experience, no bookkeeping experience. She had no idea, right? But she knew these systems she had set up for herself within QuickBooks to be able to do what she needed to do. It created the wrong books, and things weren't done right, and stuff, but it's also starting to tell me exactly how to do things. And we ended up having to break up. I fired her because it just wasn't working. We were not on the same page. She didn't respect me, just do my work and do it the way that I needed to, the way I set up my systems so that I can be profitable and do the job. She really just needed to hire someone like $10 an hour and say, press this button, press that button, do this, do that. Like, that's what she wanted. It was not what she did not want, what I was providing. So it was a really bad situation. We had to break up. You morally don't agree with something. This happens too, where you get into a situation, you learn more about a business and things that the decisions they're making, and you don't agree with them. You don't support them. Don't be involved with it. Walk away, because that is a really bad situation to be in. You don't want to step into anything legally that's going to be your responsibility, where you get in trouble, you put your business at risk, anything like that. If you do not agree with something they're doing, then I don't think there's anything you can do to save that relationship. You just need to walk away. And that brings me into, how do we do this? How do we break up with a client, right? We got to give them some sort of notification. This day and age, there's going to be emails. You can do a phone call, but you definitely want to have some sort of writing support of this. Might want to start with the email and say, hey, we can discuss this over a phone, And if you do a phone call, then follow that up with an email saying, here's what we discussed. Here's everything laid out. Because this is where being on the same page is critical, beyond critical, because you want to make sure this ends like nicely, and there's nothing. This is where everything can blow up in your face and be horrible, right? You just need it to end and be done with it. So pay attention to your contract. Do you have some sort of notification that you need to give the client? Same thing on, if they're letting you go, do they need to have some sort of notification, 60 days, whatever it is? How does that work? In a lot of contracts, you can have language of if they don't pay, or certain situations that come up, like maybe a morality thing where, or a legality thing or something like that, where you can immediately stop the contract. But you need to respect that contract and look to it as guidance as to how you're going to get out of this thing. Don't feel the need to explain yourself. Don't say like, hey, I'm not profitable on this anymore. Hey, I don't like you as a person. This isn't fun. I'm done with you. That sort of stuff. Or I am having a hard time and I can't manage this, or I let an employee go and I can't handle the workload, all that stuff. They don't need to know. It's not their business. It's your business. It's not their business. What they need to know is that you're not going to be doing work for them anymore. And be like, I regret to inform you, I'm no longer able to provide you accounting services, and per our agreement, I'm going to end it as of this date, and I will help you do blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about that in a second. So again, very basic, straightforward. Don't feel the need to explain yourself, the situation, why you came to that conclusion, anything like that. Just keep it simple. And that way you're too avoiding emotions. So when you think about all of these things, examples I just showed you, it's kind of, they're excuses. They're not necessarily bad excuses, but they can be seen as excuses, emotional. People start judging them. Don't put them in a situation where they're going to judge your decision. Just tell them what the decision is. It's done. You can't fix it. You can't get out of it. Don't give them that opportunity, and don't tell them that they're horrible. Don't make anything. This is a very awkward situation anyways. Just tell them how it is. Be respectful. Don't put in a whole bunch of adjectives of, you're horrible or all that sort of stuff. I just keep it super simple and straightforward and take any emotions out of it. Be respectful. Don't feel like you have to explain yourself. You just want to keep it strictly business, just as simple and concise as possible in these situations. And so then we go into how do we let go of this client? How do we basically offboard this client, right? If you're cutting ties immediately, then you're cutting ties immediately, right? You are going to have to do some of this stuff, but that timeline is right there at that date where you give a notification. But for me, when I'm letting go of a client, you got to think about what kind of relationship you want going forward. If you just weren't profitable on it, it wasn't a good fit, you would work with them in a different situation or something like that. Maybe they could be a good referral source for other businesses or something in the future. You don't want to completely destroy that relationship, right? You want to be supportive of things. So give them a timeline as to what to expect. So if you say, I'm giving you 60 days notice off of that, then our engagement will end as of the end of next month. And then give them a listing of work that will be completed by then. What's also helpful when you do that is that they can utilize that list to talk to other accountants and bookkeepers as to what work needs to be done in the future. So they get a current listing of the stuff that you're doing. So you have that there. Also detail out if there's anything you're not going to do. If you're not going to close that last month out, tell them that. If you're not, your last payroll run that you're providing for them is this. Anything that's extremely imperative that they need to know for the operations of their business, tell them that, give them that heads up, because it just feels like the decent thing to do so that their business isn't negatively affected by this, by something you do, right? Provide the list of accounts that need to be deactivated. Just like when you get access to all those accounts at the beginning, we got to reverse all of that out. Log me out of here, get me out of this, eventually remove me as an accountant from your QBO, all of that sort of stuff, right? And then provide the client with any documents that they need, any deliverables that they have, all of that stuff. Like just anything that you have sitting out there, hand it over to them what you need. Now, you don't need to necessarily provide them with your checklist, your internal documentation workflows, because that's not their property. That's your business intellectual property. Now, you can provide some of that information if you want to, but don't feel obligated to. You might even want to include that in your contract as to what's yours and what's theirs. Saying you're not going to give them a template that you created to be able to import information easily into QBO, because that's your business process. That's what you did to make this client work, right? So be clear on that, but do be open to provide them what is actually theirs. Okay. Unsubscribe from any apps that you aren't going to need for them anymore. My example, HubDoc or Bill.com or I don't know what other apps that you might be using on them. If you're using them internally, cut those subscriptions, disconnect those from QBO and get those taken care of. And give them a explanation, expectation as to what happens if they need something in the future. You can say, hey, I'm going to provide you all of this work up to this date. If you need anything past that time, I'm going to charge blah, blah, blah per hour. And usually put that as a high dollar amount because it makes them less likely to come to you and ask you questions. There'll be some questions here and there, maybe, but if you make it expensive, they'll be less likely to reach out, and hopefully the new accounting firm will figure out and handle it on their own. So that's one thing, say that you're open to it, but if you price it out of what they really want to pay, then they'll figure it out themselves. So do that, but it's still, you're doing it in a way, business way, but so it's benefiting you, but it's not hurting your relationship going forward. It's not saying, oh, I'm not going to help you with anything. You made it possible. They just don't want to pay it. It's their decision, right? So put that out there. What if they need a document in the future? What are you going to do? That, kind of give them that opening. The other thing that I have also done is say, hey, here's my work that's going to be completed. When you're hiring someone or if you're going to take over a process, if I have to train them or you on something, that's a different fee. That is not part of the end of our scope, the end of our engagement. This is a different thing, and that will be charged out at this or whatever. Okay. Because teaching someone else to do what I was doing, I wasn't getting paid for that. So make sure you have that as a separate thing. Okay. So that's how we close out a project. Hopefully we don't have to do that a whole bunch, but it is definitely something you want to know how to do when the situation comes up, and realize that it always takes longer than you expect, and it takes more work than you expect. For some reason, it takes up more time. So give yourself some grace on that, and know that, but know that once you let that client go, you're going to free yourself up for so much more. So it will be worth it in the end.